Hi guys and welcome to IFA Rambling Part 2, and in case you were wondering why I didn't include the Sony Xperia Z5 and the Huawei Z5 S for example in Part 1, there is quite a delay because of my slow connection, so these weren't even announced yet when I made Part 1. I will get into all of these in Part 2. And what I won't do though, I won't go into all the specifics because I did this in the first attempt of this video and it got way too long, so I will only go into the really important stuff. So let's start with the Sony Xperia Z5. What do they all have in common? All have a Snapdragon 810, IP65 and 68, so water and dust proof, quick charge, 32GB of storage plus SD card, 3GB of RAM, the compact only has 2, 23 megapixel rear cam, 5 megapixel front cam with amazing autofocus times, fingerprint button on the side. So that's what they have in common. So let's get to the Z5 Compact, which I personally think will again be the small flagship of the year. It won't be beaten because no one does flagships in a small form factor, so they will win here definitely if people actually really want that. But Sony has still issues with distribution in other markets, but this is the one small that will definitely be great because 4.6 inch 720p display, fine. Size is also okay, weight is okay, 2700 milliamps hour of battery. This is the one where I expect about, in my use from what I see of the Snapdragon 810, about 4 hours of screen time. 2 days of battery life is something I don't see on any of those happen. If we go to the Z5, 5.2 inch 1080p display, size identical to the Z3, 154 grams, also fine, 2900 milliamps of battery. Here I expect at best 4 hours. Also no 2-day battery life, I don't just see that. Z5 Premium, 5.5 inch 4K display with whopping 808 ppi. Size 4mm wider, 8mm taller than the Z3, half a millimeter thicker. So the Z3, as some of you maybe know, for me in the hand is pretty much my total sweet spot. It lies in the hand, fits perfectly for one hand use and everything. Now if I consider 4mm wider, this could be hard because we don't have a rounded back or so. So these 4mm maybe don't sound much, but I have short fingers. For me, I would definitely have to see, but I think it's a little bit out of my sweet spot range already. The height is okay, thickness is also okay, weight with 180 grams. I read somewhere that this would actually have a stainless steel frame instead of the aluminum frame of the Z5 and Z5 Compact. If that's true, it could be a little bit more robust. That's why it's also a little bit more heavy. I'm not quite sure if that's true. My opinion about those phones, the Z5 Compact could be worth the upgrade. Sounds really nice and compelling. The Z5 I don't see so much compelling if you already have a Z3 or something similar, because you only get the fingerprint sensor or the fingerprint scanner. Design is very similar with the odd button placement on all, way too low, and the better camera. If that's worth it, I'm not quite sure. The Z5 then, the premium, maybe yes, because it has at least something different to offer. It is a little bit bigger, maybe feels even more premium, and has the 4K display, so still I'm a little bit on the fence for all of them. They are also quite high priced, so not quite sure. Let's get to the next one, the Huawei Z5 S. 5.5 inches 1080p, Kirin 935, 3GB of RAM, 32GB plus SD, 30 megapixel rear, 8 megapixel front cam. Size seems a little bit better than on the Z5 Premium because it is slightly narrower, thinner and shorter, but this comes with a caveat. With 156 grams it is a more lightweight, but only 2700 milliamps hour of battery. If we now compare the old one, the Ascent 7 had 6 inches 4100 milliamps of battery, so a lot bigger. So 5.5 inches, it uses a Super AMOLED by the way, which could look very nice with Gorilla Glass 4, but 5.5 inches 1080p with 27, no, that won't work. I expect maybe 3.5 hours of screen time at best with my use again. And on the Z5 Premium, actually, since we talked about that, I see 3 hours of screen time here. I don't know how efficient the 4K display is yet. No one knows, but we will have to see. But just the Snapdragon 810 with this battery size. I'm not quite sure how efficient that will be in terms of battery life, but I don't see 2 days everywhere. So the next one, Huawei Ascend G8, which is kind of a slightly watered down Ascend Mate S, 5.5 inch 1080p here again. I think this one would be an IPS. Snapdragon 615, so a little bit low in performance, but should be still good. 3GB of RAM, 32GB of storage plus SD, 3000 milliamps of battery. With the 615, this could be okay, but I still just see 3.5 hours of possible. 167 grams. Yeah, and 30 megapixel rear, 5 megapixel front. Both have the fingerprint scanner, but the issue on these devices for me is the price. The Huawei Ascend Mate S costs 650 euros and the G8 400, which is too much for both. They should at least the S should be maybe 200 less, so 450, and this one 300 according to the specs, maybe 350, but they are definitely not priced well. That's it for the phones for right now. I will go to the convertible laptops right now because I found 2 interesting ones, even though a few specs seem a little bit odd for me. I'm talking about the Lenovo Yoga 260 and 460. The 260 is a 12.5 incher, the 460 is a 14 incher. Just real quick about the 260. 12.5 inches, 768p or 1080p. Let's talk about the 1080p because the other one is rubbish anyways. Up to Skylake i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 10 hours of battery life, 512 gigabytes of SSD. Size seems okay, starting at 950. All sounds fine here, but the issue right now, because the way more compelling device for me sounds like the 460, but this one has a little bit of odd specs. Let's go through them. 14 inches with 1080p or 1440p, which I think is the sweet spot. 14 inches with 1440p, that's the one to go for. Least scaling issues and best resolution. Definitely a big step up over 1080p. Also Skylake i7, optional 940M NVIDIA card. So if you need a little bit more GPU intensive power, then you will get this on this one. But the odd thing here is it says only 8 gigabytes of RAM, where the smaller model actually has 16 gigabytes of RAM. That doesn't make so much sense for me. Also 10 hours of battery life. Also the odd thing here is 256 gigabytes of SSD or 1 terabyte of HDD. So why this one has less storage and less RAM, it doesn't make sense for me, because it seems like the more pro model or the better spec model, and especially on the RAM and SSD they skimp out, because 16 gigabytes of RAM in the future, if you especially have the NVIDIA and want to do more intensive stuff, this should have been the case. So that is really odd to see. What else did we see? We saw the Huawei watch for $399 and we saw the Moto 360, where I don't even know the price because I don't give a fuck about either of them. The 360 doesn't look appealing at me at all. It has the flat tire, is a deal breaker for me. Yes, it sounds superficial and stupid maybe, but for me that's a deal breaker with my OCD, and this looks just wrong. Also has the locks now. Doesn't really look anything special anymore. The Huawei watch looks a lot more appealing to me, but is a little bit on the price. You have to decide. What I found though as well was quite an interesting higher mid-range tablet. The LG G Pad 2 10.1 inch, 1920 by 1200 resolution, Snapdragon 800 with prop optimization on Lollipop could still run very fine. 2 gigabytes of RAM. Yes, I would definitely like to see 3 gigabytes of here, especially since you have dual window on the LG UI. So a little bit sad to see 16 gigabytes plus SD, fine. 7400 milliamp hours of battery, which could provide a really nice battery life because the Snapdragon 800 is quite efficient. 489 grams, fine. No pricing here yet. So the way I see it, this could be, for a nice price, a nice higher mid-range tablet, definitely nice. So to round it up, C5 compact, very nice. Z5, nice but not that compelling. Z5 premium, compelling if you want the 4K, if that's something special you want. The Huawei SandMate S, just too expensive, but really nice compact design. Yeah, with the caveat of the smaller battery. So that is the issue for me. The G8, a little bit too high priced, and both have the Huawei UI, which is quite a big bummer because they really have to figure out something new. They have to make a change because this is not the way they should go in terms of software. I didn't like it at all on the Huawei SandMate 7. It gets the job done, but definitely not in a pleasant way. Then the two Lenovos with the odd specs. The 460 would sound like the one that I would like to go for, but the specs are too odd for now. Then the watches and the LG pad. I covered it all. I hope it was still manageable in terms of specs. It was a little bit dry, but that's the case if you talk about so many different devices with so many specs. But I did give you a lot of input, what I think of them as well. Maybe you like that, leave it a thumbs up. Leave me your comments, what was interesting for you or what wasn't. Okay, until next time, bye.